In FNAF's hardest challenges, luck plays one of the most important roles in determining whether or not a player can win. Sometimes you can play perfectly, but the game just decides that today is not your day, throwing hours of attempts away due to nothing but pure randomness. It's no secret that in these FNAF games, I tend to have some of the worst luck that is realistically possible. This became so much of a meme that I decided to try and beat all of the vanilla FNAF games max modes modded to always give me the worst possible RNG in two different videos. But today I've decided that I finally need a break. In the worst luck videos, I got a bunch of comments that were requesting an interesting idea. Not a challenge per se, but more of a theoretical exploration into FNAF's code. What if instead of being the Bones 5 and getting the worst possible luck, you were a magical max mode player that always got the best possible luck? How easy would the hardest challenges in each of these games be? Could you beat them by doing absolutely nothing? Well, that's what we're here to answer. Today, let's see if it's possible to lose in FNAF's max modes with the best possible luck. For each FNAF game, we'll modify the game so that anything that can go right will always go right. Then it will rank each game on a scale. If you're so lucky that it is straight up impossible to lose despite trying everything in your power, we'll give the game a platinum trophy. If you can beat the entire main game and all additional content within the game, like extra boss fights and max modes while doing absolutely nothing, we'll give it a gold trophy. If we can beat the main game by doing nothing, but not the max modes of the game, we'll give it a silver trophy. But as an additional test, see how little we have to do in order to beat the max mode, and test what the minimum number of inputs required is to beat the mode. If the game is extremely similar to how it plays normally, it'll get a bronze trophy and a sad face. To begin, we have to look at the game that started it all, FNAF 1. There are a lot of concepts in FNAF 1 that will carry over to how luck plays a role in all of the other games, so I'll try to go over some of the most basic concepts here. The first of which is movement opportunities. This concept has been beaten to death in countless other videos, but the general idea is that on some given interval for an animatronic, they use their AI value to roll a chance to move, with that chance usually being out of 20. For example, let's take Bonnie on night 4. His movement interval is 4.97 seconds, and at the very beginning of the night, his AI level is 2. This gives him a 2 in 20 or a 10% chance to move every 4.97 seconds. Since this movement is chance-based, we can immediately eliminate Freddy, Bonnie, and Chica from the main game. Looking at their AI values during the main game, Bonnie's highest AI value is 8, Chica's is 9, and Freddy's is 3. Since all of these AI values result in chances less than 100%, they won't be moving at all for the entire game. Foxy works similarly with his movement opportunities, causing him to progress out of Pirate's Cove, and since he never succeeds in any movements, Foxy will also stay idle for the entire game. This means that for FNAF 1's main game, you can do absolutely nothing for nights 1 to 6, allowing you to win nights with ludicrous amounts of power remaining. The much more interesting question is if this will also work on the 420 mode. With every animatronic set to 20 AI, we can't rely on the movement chance of animatronics always failing. But we can rely on some animatronics being total idiots with their pathfinding. Bonnie and Chica have almost complete free roam of their respective sides of the building, and if we put their movements into a directed graph, we can see that there are many 2-camera cycles that they can get trapped in. Since we have the power of God RNG on our side, Bonnie and Chica will always trap themselves in a loop. However, with Freddy and Foxy, we aren't so lucky. Unlike Bonnie and Chica, Freddy's movement path is linear and acyclic, and he's on a straight shot for your office. The only way to halt Freddy's progress is to either watch him on the cameras over his movement intervals, causing him to be stalled in place, keep the cameras up for the entire night, or shut the door once he arrives at your hall corner. Though, all of these methods seem to require too many inputs or use too much power for someone as lazy as us. Freddy's movement interval is the shortest of all of the animatronics, so we definitely don't want to be pulling up the cameras every 3.02 seconds. Thankfully, Freddy's AI changes a bit once it's time for him to enter your office. If you're watching him on camera 4B, he gets shy and won't approach, even when you drop the cameras. However, that's still 3 inputs, 1 to pull up the cameras, select camera 4B, and then pull them down. But there is one last RNG factor that we can use to our advantage. If instead of stalling Freddy, we let him into our office, he doesn't immediately jump scare us. Instead, he lingers in the office, waiting for a random 25% chance every second while the cameras are down to initiate his jump scare. You know what that means. Even if Freddy is waiting in the office for the entire night, he'll never have the luck to attack us. Even though it's a little concerning that Freddy might be behind us for hours at a time, he's powerless to attack, leaving one last character, Foxy. Unfortunately, Foxy's random events are a little bit less exploitable than Freddy's. Excluding his base movement chance, the only other random events that Foxy has are his stage in Pirate's Cove on return from your office, and how long Foxy is stalled for upon pulling up the cameras. Ideally, we never even want Foxy coming to our door, as that would mean 2 inputs to both close and open the door. But we have no way to avoid this without some kind of inputs, even with our RNG powers. If we do absolutely nothing, Foxy will always succeed his first 3 movements. From here, he waits in the hall for 25 seconds before jump scaring, ending our run at 40 seconds every single time. This locks FNAF 1 out of a gold trophy, but how little do we have to do to win? Well, the first test that I had was keeping up the cameras for the entire night, specifically waiting until 14 seconds, then pulling up the cameras. Any longer and Foxy would be able to exit Pirate's Cove. This uses a lot of power, but completely locks both Freddy and Foxy in place, only with 1 input. However, as the night went on, it was clear that I wouldn't have enough power to survive. Though, there was still a little bit of hope, as the amount of time that Freddy gives you when powering out is also luck-based. Powering out is split up into 3 stages: waiting for Freddy to arrive, Freddy's song, and the blackout. Each of these have a 20% chance to end early, with the check running every 5 seconds on phases 1 and 2 and every 2 seconds on phase 3. Though all of these phases are guaranteed to end after 20 seconds no matter what. It's important to note that these 5-second and 20-second checks don't start when the power goes out, they start when the night starts, meaning if your power goes out closer to one of these 20-second checks, your power out could be faster. Since this is an element of luck that isn't inside the game and is instead more so related to the player outside of it, I didn't bother with this interval alignment. Point is that the absolute max that we're getting out of a power out is 60 seconds, and we powered out at 7:14, leading to a death at 8:16. Unfortunately, we're going to need more than 1 input to survive, but I think we might be able to do it in 2. Nights in FNAF 1 are 8 minutes and 55 seconds long, so we're going to need to make up around 40 seconds. Now, remember earlier when I said that Foxy has another luck-based aspect in his mechanics? It has to do with how long he's stalled after the cameras are pulled down. The game will stall him for 50 frames plus any number from 0 to 999, which equates to anywhere from 0.83 seconds to 17.48 seconds. So in our case, we're going to have 17.48 seconds until Foxy is eligible to move again. We already know that he's in phase 3 and ready to go, since we wait at the start of the night to conserve power. But Foxy will always wait 25 seconds in the west hallway before going to our door unless we look at that camera to force him to run. This means that on average, we'll have about 48 seconds from when we drop the cameras until Foxy gets in. This would give us enough time to power out before Foxy gets here, but not enough power to make it to 7:55. It was at this point that I realized this video was still the Bones 5 video, and there was going to be a bit of challenge in figuring out exactly how to map out the camera flips in FNAF 1 to use as little inputs as possible. Bear with me here because this is about to get a little bit math heavy and complicated. There's no point in us using the doors to block off Foxy, as using 2 inputs to close and open the doors is the exact same as closing and opening the cameras, except Foxy will be stalled for less time and take power upon hitting the door. So all that matters to us is finding the perfect times to pull up the cameras. And to figure that out, we have to look into interval alignments. FNAF 1 is really annoying for this because every animatronic's movement intervals are slightly offset by a small amount from a flat integer, like Bonnie's being 4.97 seconds instead of just a flat 5 seconds. In later games, Scott had no issue just putting everyone on flat 5-second intervals, but I guess he wanted the animatronics to slowly desync more and more as the night went on, maybe to make the game feel more random. Foxy is no different, with his interval being 5.01 seconds instead of 5 seconds. So the first step here is to map out every single Foxy interval throughout the night so we can squeeze out as much time as possible when the cameras are down. The way that I did this was finding an interval that I wanted Foxy to fail, then subtracting 17.48 from it, as that's how long Foxy is stalled after the cameras are down. Then, if we pull down the cameras on that exact value, Foxy will miss an extra movement opportunity and we can leave the cameras down for longer, saving more power. For example, if we look at the 40.08 interval and subtract 17.48, we get 22.6. So if we drop the cameras at any time later than 22.6, we'll be guaranteed to fail the 40.08 interval, and we can flip up at 44 seconds, right before the next interval. You can implement this anywhere in the night, but I chose to do it earlier to get it out of the way faster. However, even with one more flip, I still didn't have enough power to make it through the night. What's worse, the intervals for the power out sequence were screwing me up. Even though we fail every random 5-second check, Freddy is guaranteed to advance in his blackout stages every 20 seconds. And since these 20-second checks run on top of the night, 8 minutes would be a 20-second interval, meaning we have to power out right as the 8-minute mark hits to avoid this 20-second interval. I added another cam flip and still I was either powering out or overshooting it. But with one more and dropping the cameras at 7:16 to guarantee that Foxy doesn't jump scare at 8 minutes, we should have enough. Same pace as before, drop at 16. Alright. That should line it up pretty much perfectly, dude. He had to have been right there. Oh my god, that was all right. Here we go. This should be it. It checks at 8:20. Like it should have. There we go. Okay. Then it checks at 8:40 and then we win. Here we go. Okay. He shouldn't be able to kill until 9 and night ends at 8:55. Jeez. Okay. This was my route. I do not think it's possible to get lower than this amount of inputs. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 8 inputs total to beat 420, assuming you have God-given RNG. That it took me about an hour to map that out, which is crazy, but I think that's the lowest it gets. Maybe 6 if someone can find out how to do this better. That's, I think, in theory, the best you can do. That was a lot more math than I expected for a video that was supposed to be the easiest possible challenge. But hey, now we know that assuming you have the best possible luck, FNAF 1's 420 mode can be beaten in a grand total of 8 inputs, giving FNAF 1 a nice silver trophy. Now let's move on to FNAF 2, which is hopefully a little less complicated. And if you're enjoying this video so far, please consider subscribing, liking, or hyping this video. It's free and you can always unsubscribe if you want. It helps me out a bunch and means the world. Along with this usual promo section of the video, I'd also like to mention a much more serious matter that was brought to my attention. I had no idea this was going on until I was just about done with this video, so sorry if it's a bit awkwardly placed, but a user named Zucchini King hopped in my stream and mentioned a movement in the FNAF fangame community. A developer of a long ongoing project for the Return to Freddy's 5 named Jim has been dealing with extremely difficult and abusive living conditions and needed help to pay off a surgery for his jaw. And as someone who has a good bit of reach in this community, I was willing to promote it. The first link in the description for this video will be the GoFundMe link for Save Jim, and I'll also provide an additional link to a video by Oscar McGuire that goes a little bit deeper into Jim's situation if you'd like to verify the integrity of what's going on. Everyone was extremely happy when I said that I would promote it, so if you want to make an entire community's day, head on over to the GoFundMe to help save Jim. Again, I'm sorry if this is a little bit awkward, but it synced up perfectly with when I was about to release this video, and I feel that putting it in an actual main channel video would help give a lot more outreach than a community post. Now, let's get back to it. FNAF 2 uses the exact same movement system as FNAF 1 for most characters, but some work a little bit differently. For everyone pictured on screen here, they're functionally the exact same as the FNAF 1 animatronics. The only difference is that they move in a more linear path to your office, rather than free roaming around the building. We'll be referring to these characters as regular animatronics, as for our purposes, they pretty much all work the same. So we can assume that for all regular animatronics, if their AI is less than 20, they won't be able to move at all. And in the main game, just like FNAF 1, none of them even come close,
with the highest being Mangle on night 5 at 10 AI.
We know that these regular characters won't bother us, but what about these weird animatronics, the irregular characters?
The least concerning of all of these is Golden Freddy, as in the main game, the chance of him appearing is extremely low, though if he does happen to roll the chance to appear at the beginning of the night, he will be turned on for that night, in which case he has an AI in 20 chance to appear every 5 seconds when the cameras are pulled up. In our case, this chance will always fail, so we won't need to worry about Golden Freddy, but Foxy is a lot more problematic. Like FNAF 1, Foxy is again the character that's going to cost us the most here, as his AI level isn't used to roll a chance to move, it just increases the time until he moves. Foxy is inevitable no matter how lucky you are. His movement into the hallway and determining whether or not he's going to attack you use the same equation. Simplifying this equation a little bit, Foxy will randomly generate a number between 21 and 25, then subtract that number by this D variable, which is used to track how long Foxy has gone without being stunned by the flashlight. Once this side of the equation evaluates to a number that is less than or equal to Foxy's AI level, it becomes true. Once this equation is true, if Foxy isn't in the hallway, he'll move there, and if he's already in the hallway, he will now wait for a 5-second interval. Even though the D variable is incremented by 1 every second, the validity of the equation is only checked every 5 seconds. So you could still stun Foxy before a 5-second interval to save yourself even if the equation evaluates to true. If you fail to do this before a 5-second interval passes, Foxy will jump scare you on the next 10-second interval if a blackout is not occurring, which gives us the maximum amount of time to flash him. But unfortunately, without even doing any field testing yet, I can tell you that we're going to need to use some inputs here to keep Foxy at bay. The last of the irregular characters is the puppet, who you might think would absolutely eat up our input counter, requiring the cameras to be pulled up, the box to be wound, and the cameras to be pulled down. But Puppet is a bit more luck-based than you might think. Her music box duration is completely fixed. Luck won't affect that at all, only the night number will. But once the box runs out, Puppet isn't much different from any of the other regular animatronics. Despite not being included in the custom night menu, probably because it would just look gross and uneven, Puppet does have an AI value for each night just like every other character. If the box is empty, the Puppet begins having movement opportunities to progress out of the box and move towards your office, with an AI in 20 chance every second. She takes a fixed linear path like the rest of the cast. With this interval being much shorter than the other animatronics, this guarantees a quick death in normal gameplay, while still being random enough to induce anxiety in the player.
Come on, 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 dude, come on, dude.
However, with our RNG powers, we just don't care. We can let the box run out instantly, and despite having a completely open box, the Puppet will be powerless to leave. This means that the only inputs we'll have to commit to dealing with FNAF 2 will be with Foxy. Even at 0 AI, Foxy is always going to be active due to the nature of his equation. He's only manually turned off at 2 points in the game, all of night 1 and the first 2 hours of night 2. But once 2 AM hits on night 2, Foxy is switched on, and from here on, we have no way of preventing him with luck alone. Now it's just a question of how many inputs it's gonna take to keep him away. We have 2 options here. We can either quickly flash him to reset his kill timer and save the flashlight battery, or we can hold the flashlight on him in hopes of getting rid of him. We have more flashlight battery on earlier nights of the game, so to save some extra inputs, let's go with the holding option. In order to make Foxy completely leave the hallway and go back to parts and service, he'll have to have the flashlight on him for 100 times the night number frames. Since we're on night 2, that's 200 frames or 3.33 seconds. Though we won't need to have the flashlight on for exactly 3.33 seconds. Even though the flashlight visually turns off once we stop holding down the control key, the flashlight within the game's code can only turn off on 1-second intervals. Even though we don't see it, the flashlight is still resetting Foxy's timer and adding to this leave timer until the next 1-second interval. So as long as we hold the flashlight down for a little over 3 seconds, we'll be okay. From here, we just have to wait until Foxy enters the hallway again, which will be indicated by this sound cue. and then see how long we can let him sit there until we have to get rid of him again, which can be simplified to 25 minus Foxy's AI seconds. If this calculation doesn't exactly result in a 5-second interval, we can round it up to the nearest 5-second interval. On night 1, Foxy isn't present, and with him not here, there's actually no way to even lose this night at all. But once night 2 hits, we start using our strategy to make Foxy leave. Since Foxy isn't active for the first 2 hours of the night, this shouldn't require too many inputs, just 5 flashes to get rid of him, totaling at 5 inputs. For nights 3 and 4, it's much of the same. Even though we're using more flashlight battery power with each night, we still have enough to make Foxy leave. On night 4, Foxy's AI jumps to 7, causing us to have to use an extra input, totaling at 7 and 8 inputs for each night. However, on night 5 and onwards, we're down to the lowest battery amount in the game, with only 3,000 frames. We still want to hold as much as possible to stretch out our inputs, but if we try to do that for the entire night, our flashlight will run out. Instead, I held down the flashlight for as long as possible until the flashlight was empty and blinking, indicating that our flashlight battery is less than 500 frames. From here, I just began to green run as hard as I could, stalling out Foxy, then tapping the control key for as little time as possible. This resulted in 10 inputs for night 5 and a whopping 20 for night 6. Now, all that was left was 1020 mode. You might think that 1020 mode would be when our god RNG powers finally break, as all of the characters have been set to 20 AI. Meaning they'll now always succeed in movement opportunities. This was true in FNAF 1, but it isn't true here. You see, FNAF 2 has hard AI caps on each animatronic, even if they're set to a higher AI level in the custom night menu. All of the regular animatronics are capped at 15, Foxy is capped at 17, and Golden Freddy is capped at 10, meaning that this roster on screen is gameplay-wise equivalent to 1020 mode. This also means that no one here, not even the puppet, has a 100% chance to move on their movement opportunities, so even for 1020 mode, our only threat is still Foxy. On night 7, we now have to flash Foxy for a full 11.67 seconds in order for him to go away, and with our limited battery, this only gets us 4 holds before we're forced to begin stalling.
Okay.
I'm curious if I can make it with this much. We'll see. With a blinking flashlight that was already decently through its 500 frames as early as 231, I had to be super precise with my flashes. And with many nerve-wracking clicks later, I managed to close it out with a total of 26 inputs.
Okay, one more click. Please, have enough. Okay, we're good.
Like FNAF 1, FNAF 2 didn't really score big here. In fact, it did considerably worse than FNAF 1 in terms of required inputs, especially throughout the main game. And I was starting to notice a bit of a pattern. Games that were more difficult and less consistent in the worst luck videos seemed to perform better here than games that were possible with the worst possible luck. Which makes sense. A game that is more RNG focused should, in theory, be easier given the best RNG. So let's see how the most luck-based FNAF game fares with the best possible luck. FNAF 3 was an absolute nightmare with the worst possible luck. Springtrap bomb rushes to your office in about 10 seconds and you can do pretty much nothing to stop him. But now, not only is he super slow, he's no smarter than Bonnie and Chica from FNAF 1. When the night first starts and Springtrap spawns into the map, he'll pick a random camera from 6 to 10, but for us, he's always going to pick camera 10. Springtrap does work on movement opportunities, but his equation is a bit more complex than that. It's designed in a similar way to Foxy's equation from FNAF 2, where it's luck-based how long it takes Springtrap to move, but eventually he will, no matter what. However, there's nothing stopping Springtrap from just bouncing between cameras 9 and 10 for the entire night, as his pathfinding both between cameras and into vents is completely open and up to him to decide. So we know that not only is Springtrap not a threat, he can't even be a threat. But maybe there might be a way to make him one intentionally. My first thought was to try and use audio lures to get him to move towards us. but since this is technically the best luck, Springtrap wouldn't ever listen to our lures, instead deciding that whatever is in cameras 9 and 10 is more interesting. Ventilation errors have a chance to make Springtrap appear in cameras that are closer to us, but these are merely hallucinations and don't do anything to affect his pathfinding. The only other thing that I could think of that might help us lose are phantom animatronics. All of the phantom animatronics are chance-based, having AI levels equal to the night number all the way up until night 6 when they're set to 7 AI. We won't be getting any chance-based encounters, but Phantom Balloon Boy, Phantom Mangle, Phantom Chica, Phantom Freddy, and Phantom Puppet all have forced spawns at certain times in the night, given you meet certain conditions. If you've ever felt that FNAF 3 is completely out of your control after you fumble a bit and get jump scared by a phantom, don't worry, that's normal, because when a phantom animatronic jump scares you, Springtrap straight up cheats and teleports closer to you. So I thought that maybe if I got enough phantom jump scares lined up to happen one after another, I might be able to push Springtrap past the glass and into our office. Unfortunately, this idea was also another dead end. Even if we manage to line up a ton of phantom jump scares, Springtrap will only move forward if he's in cam 5 already. If he's in the top half of the map, he has a chance to teleport to either cams 4, 5, or 10, meaning that he's just going to go straight back to cam 10 and continue his loop. Not only can you win FNAF 3's aggressive nightmare mode without doing anything at all, you straight up can't lose, giving FNAF 3 our first platinum trophy. Now going from the least consistent game to the most consistent with the worst possible luck, let's see how FNAF 4 fares with the best possible luck. In the worst luck series, FNAF 4 was the most consistent game out of the bunch, and I'd say it was honestly the least difficult possible game. But man, I had no idea the amount of work that I was in for deciphering FNAF's minimum required inputs while circumventing all of the glitches this game has to offer. In FNAF 4, the same AI and 20 movement chance is used like every other game. Here it affects Bonnie, Chica, and Foxy, but not Freddy. Similar to how Foxy was in previous games, Freddy is going to be a major nuisance for us here. While Bonnie, Chica, and Foxy are completely frozen in place, Freddy acts the exact same as he would in normal gameplay. Every 4 seconds, Freddy adds his AI level to his progress, and once you reach 60 progress, you'll be guaranteed a jump scare the moment you flash the bed. Once he reaches 80 progress, you'll die no matter where you are in the room. If you couldn't tell already, Freddy completely locks us out of 2 of our trophies, and he has 0 RNG whatsoever. Throughout the main game, Freddy's AI value matches the night number to start, then usually gets bumped up throughout the night, while on extra nights in 420 mode, it's typically 1 below the night number. If we know all of these progress values, we can do a bit of mental math to see how often we should have to clear Freddy from the bed, as for most of the game, it's the only input that matters to us. For some of these nights, it seems like we can go minutes without doing anything at all, and still be okay with Freddy. But as we've seen with previous videos involving FNAF 4, it isn't that simple. On nights 2 and beyond, if you go a full 30 seconds without running anywhere in the room, Freddy will begin to add an additional 1 progress to his counter every 0.2 seconds, resulting in lethal progress in just 12 seconds. This means that for night 1, we can legitimately stay idle for a full 4 minutes and beat the night in 2 inputs, 1 to turn to the bed and 1 to flash around 4:30. But for every night beyond that, we're going to have to commit extra precious inputs to ensuring this additional progress check is never switched on. Going into night 2, I had a simple strategy. Right before every 30-second interval, run to the closet, wait 30 more seconds, then run back. And it was going well, until somehow this happened.
Excuse me? Who are you? What the hell? What?
This made no sense at all. Bonnie and Chica shouldn't even be able to move until 420 mode, let alone get to the door in order to get in. Well, I had forgotten to change a sneaky aspect of FNAF 4's code.
You see, on nights 1 to 4 of FNAF 4, Bonnie and Chica's AI is so low that if the player is constantly moving from door to door, it's pretty unlikely that they'll be able to move up and jump scare you. This lulls you into a false sense of security on early nights, conditioning you to flash the doors so that way you won't even have to listen for breathing at all. As if you're fast enough, Bonnie and Chica won't even get to your doors. But on a random hour from 2 to 5 AM for Bonnie and 3 to 5 AM for Chica, they'll teleport to your door, usually catching the flashlight happy player off guard for a good scare. I had forgotten to account for this, and if coded in properly, this shouldn't be an issue. I just had to do a bit more work in order to keep Bonnie and Chica away from the doors at all costs. Initially, I had Bonnie and Chica set such that they would always fail their movement opportunities no matter what. But if they teleport to a door like they did in this run, well, they're just gonna sit there since they can't move. And once they've been sitting there for 20 minus the night number seconds, they'll jump scare you when you turn around from the bed. Unlike most other FNAF games, Bonnie and Chica can leave the doors in FNAF 4 without you manually clearing them from the doors, which is why it's possible to beat FNAF 4 without using the doors at all. On 10-second intervals, if Bonnie and Chica are at a door and they succeed in their movement opportunity, they'll move back into the hallway. So in our case, Bonnie and Chica will always choose their latest possible hour to teleport to a door. Then they'll always succeed in their first movement to move back into the hallway, remaining there for the rest of the night. With that out of the way, it was back to the puzzle of FNAF 4. In order to beat each night with the minimum inputs required, FNAF 4 began to turn into a complex puzzle of interval alignments and stalling. I started to make some spreadsheets for calculations in order to map out a night before I even tried to go into it, and I also began to find out some crucial details about these weird edge cases in FNAF 4. The first of which is optimizing the idle timer. Ideally, we'd want to spend 30 full seconds at the bed, then 30 full seconds at the closet, clicking to move on the last possible frame to minimize inputs. However, the way that this idle check works makes this a bit difficult. You see, the way the game checks if you've moved in FNAF 4 is through an animation called Carpet Run. This animation is set the moment you click to start running somewhere in the room, but from what I can tell, it doesn't stay set during the entire animation. This means that when you click, Freddy's counter will reset back to 0, but during the running animation to your destination, the counter is still counting up instead of remaining at 0 until we get there, desyncing the idle timer with our perceived time on our timer. If we try to do the same thing again, going from the closet back to the bed, leaving at 59 seconds, the desynced idle check timer will reach 30, and Freddy's AFK penalty will activate, ruining our strategy. To account for the animation duration and a little bit of human error, I instead chose to move between the bed and the closet on 27 to 29 second intervals, ensuring that even with possible 1 second desyncs, our timer will never reach 30 to activate Freddy's penalty. The difficulty then comes in trying to figure out when the best time to flash Freddy is. Ideally, we want to push Freddy as close to 60 progress as we possibly can, then keep him stalled for as long as we can to reduce flashing inputs. So I used my spreadsheet to list out every 4-second interval throughout the night. Then, based on Freddy's AI level for that night, I calculated which 4-second interval Freddy will reach 60 progress at. Then I subtracted 1 from that number, and that's when we'll have to flash Freddy. Though we don't want to just clear the Freddles then turn back around. Instead, we should stretch out how long we can keep Freddy at 0 progress before letting go and registering our input. There's a common misconception that if you stare at the bed for 15 seconds, Foxy will force turn and jump scare you. However, Foxy's timer here is cumulative, and only begins when you have the flashlight on. Otherwise, our strategy of staring at the bed for 6 minutes straight wouldn't have worked back in night 1. This means that we can flash the bed for a maximum of 15 seconds. And since we started flashing between 1:59 and 2 minutes, we know that the counter will be at 1 at 2, 2 at 2:01, and so on. Since Freddy only progresses on 4-second intervals, we can add 14 to 2, then floor the calculation to the nearest 4-second interval. In this specific example on night 2, this saves 3 progression intervals and 6 progress over just clearing the Freddles and instantly turning. And as more and more flashes are required as Freddy's AI level gets higher and higher, this will save more inputs overall.
This strategy resulted in 18 inputs for Night 2, and subsequent nights resulting in even more, with FNAF 4 being far and away the most demanding of the main games thus far. Thankfully, the final boss of FNAF 4, Fredbear, and Nightmare by extension, is considerably easier to deal with. Fredbear is meant to embody all the base FNAF 4 animatronics, taking aspects from each of them and combining it into one character, but that also means he's prone to all of their weaknesses. For one, Fredbear's AI is only 12 on Night 5, so he won't ever have a chance to move normally, making approaching us from the hallways impossible for him. His only other means of getting into our room is through his teleportation and laughing. This is done through 2 separate 30-second timers connected to the bed and the closet respectively, and our RNG powers can't do anything to stop these timers from counting up. However, once they reach 30, Fredbear and Nightmare always have a 1 in 2 chance to follow through with their laugh and teleport, meaning our RNG powers stop them in their tracks. And Fredbear is completely frozen in the center living room for the entirety of Night 5. Unfortunately, he isn't completely input free. Like Freddy, Fredbear also has an idle check. Instead of progressing ridiculously fast, however, he just straight up kills you. This timer is also 25 seconds instead of 30, so we're going to have to run on 24-second intervals instead. Despite this idle timer being shorter, the lack of Freddles to flash resulted in drastically less inputs for Night 5 compared to the rest of the main nights. But FNAF 4 doesn't end here. What about the rest of the game? Well, the puzzle was about to get much more intricate. I was really intending to make this video as a kind of break video to give myself more time to attempt some really hard challenges, specifically Hopeless Pursuit No Power Generator release version. And if you're a new viewer that just came to this channel from this video, that probably sounds like complete gibberish to you, and that's okay. Point is, it's super hard and requires a lot of time. But for what was supposed to be a free video, I was not anticipating mapping out and testing these nights to take as much time as it did. FNAF 4 has 4 additional nights, all of which follow the same pattern. The first 4 hours feature the main cast, and the last 2 hours are another showdown against Fredbear or Nightmare. Night 6 was difficult for a few reasons. For one, Freddy's AI level is up to 5 now, which starts to create issues with our mapped out 29-second intervals. These intervals are too large and cause Freddy to desync in a sense. If we were to let him go and play as normal, he'd reach 60 progress when we're scheduled to be at the closet. We have 2 options to deal with this. We can either shorten a closet interval in order to catch Freddy before he reaches 60 progress, or flash him prematurely on the first bed interval. Shortening a closet interval was my first guess, but that resulted in having to continuously shorten subsequent closet intervals in order to go back and flash Freddy again. If we just flash at the beginning of the night before we go to check on the closet for the first time, Freddy syncs up with all of the other bed intervals. The second and much greater problem is the transition from the main cast to Fredbear and Nightmare, as it has a few unintended and strange glitches. This wasn't an issue on Night 6, but with Freddy's AI being bumped up to 6 on Night 7, it started to cause some problems. In order to avoid flashing Freddy an additional time near the end of the first segment of the night, we push him beyond 60 progress, guaranteeing a death assuming we flash the bed. But remember, if we don't flash the bed, Freddy can't jump scare us anywhere else until he reaches 80 progress. And right now, Freddy's progress was set to reach 80 exactly on the 4-minute mark, and we had to hope that the game would act in our favor. So I'll ask you, what do you think will happen? Either A, Freddy's jump scare triggers before Fredbear appears and we die, or B, Freddy is deleted with the rest of the main cast and we are left unscathed. Well, the answer is neither.
What? Does it carry over? No.
Somehow, Freddy did get deleted, but Nightmare took over his role and jump scared us anyway. How? Originally, I thought this would be a problem of event order. When 2 events happen at the same time in Click Team, the one that's earlier in the code will happen before the other one. For example, if we look at the logic for whether or not Bonnie or Chica should jump scare in this situation, Bonnie's logic appears first. But because Chica's is on a later line, her condition overwrites his and she always gets the jump scare. But looking here, that didn't seem to be the case at all. You see, whenever Freddy's progression reaches 80, the game doesn't jump to a frame for his jump scare or anything. It sets an alterable variable of this black flash object instead. Let's just call it flash progress. This black flash is what creates that intense flickering you see before you die to Freddy in the bedroom. And this is exactly what we see in the code. Once Freddy's progress reaches 80, flash progress is set to a random number of frames between 50 and 149. Now, every frame, this number will be subtracted by 1 until it reaches exactly 1. Once here, you'll see that the game triggers Freddy's bedroom jump scare. But this only happens when Fredbear's AI is set to 0. Since Fredbear is activated exactly at 4 AM, the game instead uses this next line of code, triggering when Fredbear's AI is greater than 0, and causing him to jump scare us. Essentially, in Freddy's dying breaths, or dying frames rather, he sets the flash progress as an alley-oop to Nightmare, and once it reaches 1, Nightmare steals Freddy's thunder and takes the jump scare. Super complicated explanation aside, this means that we now have to ensure that Freddy is below 80 progress once 4 AM hits and Nightmare appears. It would be really unfortunate to have to commit a full run back from the closet and turn flash turn just for 4 progress, as that's an entire 4 inputs. I scanned my current spreadsheet to see if there was anything that I could be a little bit more precise on to squeeze out just a bit more Freddy progress. And after a bit of field testing, I figured out that if you're really precise with the first flash, you can flash over the 28-second interval and still turn to make it to the closet without activating Freddy's idle penalty, getting us to 4 AM without any black flash shenanigans. From here, we just have to work Nightmare's idle timer, and Night 7 is down in 26 inputs. Night 8 or 420 mode is also the exact same, as Freddy's AI is capped at 6. Where things start to get really interesting is the true max mode of FNAF 4. Nightmare mode with the blind mode, Mad Freddy, and Insta Foxy challenges on. In our case, we won't be using blind mode because that's boring for our showcase, and since we script out the night, it's literally no different, just for your viewing pleasure. There are 2 new huge factors to our puzzle here. The first of which is that Foxy is now in the closet, and the second is a wildly more aggressive Freddy. Mad Freddy sets Freddy's AI back to 5, but instead of progressing on 4-second intervals, he now progresses on 2-second intervals. Freddy now progresses way too fast for us to maintain our 29-second schedule of moving from the bed to the closet, and to compensate, I had to shorten the closet intervals as much as possible so that the second we get back to the bed, we buffer a turnaround and have just enough time to catch Freddy before he ticks over 60 progress. Thankfully, since we're shortening our closet intervals, flashing Freddy syncs up with the start of the bed interval, meaning we can still hold our flashlight on for 14 seconds to stall out Freddy. But what about Foxy? Foxy does add some inputs to our counter, but didn't become a real problem until the transition to Nightmare's portion of the night. Unlike Freddy, we aren't required to turn around, flash, and turn back around with Foxy. We just have to press one button once we arrive at the closet. So Foxy is way less input demanding than Freddy, but it was still important to strategize exactly when we have to close the closet doors, and like how we are with Freddy, maximize those closes. Foxy's progress is similar to Freddy's. Instead of 60 being his kill stage, it's 10, and he adds 1 progress every 5 seconds to his counter. However, Foxy can be stalled a lot harder than Freddy can, as unlike Freddy's guaranteed kill at 80 progress, Foxy doesn't have this. His jumpscare animation is only triggered once he's at 10 progress and you run back from the closet, run back from a door, or turn around from the bed. Meaning, even if he's at full progress, he's powerless to move. If we just stand in the center of our bedroom or run up to his closet doors, he's unable to jump scare. When the closet doors are closed, he'll subtract 1 progress every second. This lines up nicely with our first closet interval, so we'll just keep the doors shut the whole time that we're here. And at 1:30, you can see our Foxy stalling trick in action. We were able to skip the previous closet interval without closing the doors, since Foxy hadn't progressed enough to jump scare us yet. But now we have to leave the closet in order to flash Freddy. At this point, Foxy is right about to jump scare us with his progress, so we leave the closet, then buffer our turnaround and flash input to clear the frettles. Make sure to flash over the 128 interval to stall Freddy, then quickly turn around before 1:30 as Foxy's progress reaches 10. Now we can sit here and stall for a bit without Foxy being a threat, before running back to the closet to send him back to 0 progress until we have to deal with the Freddles again. Now you can kind of see what I meant at the start of this section, with FNAF 4 being an intricate puzzle for us to solve. There are many moving pieces. We can continue this strategy all the way up until the transition with Nightmare, where, once again, we've reached a problem. As it stands right now, with proper mapping and stalling Foxy, we only need to close the closet doors a total of 3 times in order to survive the first 4 hours of the night. Foxy will reach 10 progress at 340, so I had mapped out the last Freddo clear to be from 333 to 338, turning around just before Foxy reaches 10 progress. Freddy will only be at 60 progress by the time 4 AM hits, so we're more than okay with him. And since we won't be turning around from the bed or running back from the closet until Nightmare shows up, Foxy shouldn't be a problem. Alright, that should be good for the transition. Yeah, that's okay. Because that's, yeah, 24, 415, okay. Bro. He's not there. Dude, no, he... What? Oh. Oh my god, I forgot about that, bro. That was in the It's Taken video. Shit. No, can we even get around that? Because even if you go to a door, you're still... Shit, bro. I think that's an extra input. Oh, that sucks. No, dude. Unfortunately, a glitch in FNAF 4 allows Foxy to reappear just to jump scare you even if Nightmare is currently active. You see, once Foxy's progress reaches 10, a counter called Foxy Got You is set to 1. Nothing can reset this counter back to 0 unless Foxy's progress is set below 10. So, even if we watch Foxy vanish before our very eyes, he can still reappear to jump scare us right afterwards. Unfortunately, unlike Freddy's Black Flash, there was no way to optimize Foxy out of this one. We stall him for far too long at the end of 4 AM that we're forced to commit an extra closet close to Foxy, using 4 closes total throughout the night. The rest of the night is the same as usual with Fredbear or Nightmare. Even though Nightmare is now always moving at 20 AI, he's too stupid to ever move into the halls, so the only thing that we have to worry about is the idle timer. This allows us to finally finish FNAF 4, with a total input count of 43 for Nightmare, Mad Freddy, Insta-Foxy. This puts FNAF 4 at far and away the most input demanding game we've seen thus far. Sister Location is by far the most expansive game in the series, so let's see how Sister Location stacks up against the rest of the games with the best possible luck. Sister Location is a bit hard to rank among the rest of the games, as unlike every other game, Sister Location's main nights are task-based. In my last video, I took on the challenge of beating every single FNAF game simultaneously, and we took advantage of Sister Location's task-based system by doing absolutely nothing. In every night except for night 4, you start in the elevator going down to Circus Baby's warehouse, and if you do absolutely nothing, you aren't going to go anywhere. So we're just going to examine all the aspects of Sister Location that can have RNG and see how our luck affects them. As for ranking the inputs required to beat the game in comparison with the rest of the games, we'll just use the custom night instead. Night 1 is completely scripted, but night 2 is where things start to get interesting. Starting in the Ballora Gallery, a large room where we have to move through without being heard and jump scared by Ballora, and this is where the first randomness in the game appears. Though it might seem like Ballora is to the right or left of you, both with sound cues and visually, all that she really is a progression meter. Similar to Nightmare Freddy, instead of 0 to 60, it's 0 to 600. Where the RNG comes in is how Ballora decides to move towards you. On every 2-second interval, as long as the W key is not currently being held down, Ballora rolls a random number called moving between 0 and 2 inclusively. Depending on what this value is, Ballora will be more aggressive in how much progress she wants to add when you're moving, and how much she wants to subtract when you're not. If she rolls a 0, she won't progress towards you at all, even if you're sprinting through her room. And if she already happens to be progressed a bit, she'll subtract 1 from her progression every 0.03 seconds that you aren't holding W. If she rolls a 1, she can still subtract progress at a rate of 1 per every 0.03 seconds when W is not held, but now she'll add 1 progress every 0.1 second interval if you're holding W. In the worst case, she'll roll a 2, now adding 1 progress every frame frame that you hold W, instead of every 0.1 second interval, moving towards you 6 times faster. Even worse, when this value is set to 2, she's unable to decrease her progression even if we stay completely still. This is why in high-level sister location speedruns, manipulating this value is crucial. Ballora can't re-roll this value if the W key is currently being pressed, and at the start of the section, moving can only either be a 0 or a 1. So if the player is always pressing W on every 2-second interval, Ballora never has a chance to reach her most dangerous state. I never covered the main game of sister location in the Worst Luck series, so as we go through the game here, I'll be mentioning how RNG can also affect us in a negative way, as there are some pretty interesting luck-based factors in this game that you probably didn't know about. However, we aren't playing with worst luck, we're playing with best luck, and in our case, Ballora is always going to be setting her moving value to 0 instead of 1 or 2. Though, this doesn't mean that we can sprint straight to the end of the room. There are still some additional factors we have to look out for. If we hold W for 5 seconds straight, moving will be automatically set to 2, and since the value of moving can't be re-rolled unless we let go of W and pass over a 2-second interval, we'll quickly meet our demise by just holding the W key. Instead, run forward for about 4.5 seconds, then quickly let go and repress the W key in order to avoid the penalty for running for 5 seconds. We can do this all the way up until Ballora's silhouette appears in front of us, which is scripted to happen once we reach a certain point in the room. When she's on the right side of us, moving is automatically set to 2 and she'll begin adding 2 to her progress every frame, even if we aren't moving. Thankfully, when Ballora is in front of us, she's not able to jump scare us, which doesn't really make any sense, but hey, that's fine by me. Her progression can go above 600 here, and as long as it isn't above 600 when she leaves the screen, we'll be okay. Once she's on the left half of the screen, moving is set to 1 and she'll decrease her progression by 1 every frame. So we stay here until we're just under 600, then make a break for it by repressing W every 4.5 seconds or so, allowing us to finish the Ballora gallery in around 50 seconds. Completing the Ballora gallery puts us in Funtime Freddy's breaker room, one of the most endurance-based and stressful sections in the game, in which you have to hold down and reset the power in 7 different areas of the building. However, its only lethal threat is completely dependent on luck. In most FNAF games, the general way that movement is handled is that horror trope of seeing something standing in front of you, then when you look away, it's suddenly gone, or has suddenly appeared. If you're fast enough, this movement system isn't always perfect and loses some of its realism, but generally it works pretty well. In the breaker room, you would expect Funtime Freddy to start moving towards you whenever you pull up the maintenance panel to start resetting areas, but he actually won't move at all. Funtime Freddy will only progress if 3 conditions are met. You're currently resetting an area, a 2-second interval just passed, and he hits a 50% chance to progress. So even in normal gameplay, as long as you avoid resetting over 2-second intervals, Funtime Freddy is powerless to move at all. But in our case, we can't even make him move, making it completely impossible to die in this section. Ballora isn't present in our return trip to the hub, even though voice lines will play indicating that she is.
Is someone there?
So that's about it for the RNG on night 2. Moving on to night 3, we have a similar section of the Ballora gallery in the Funtime Auditorium, but it's a bit simpler RNG wise. If you're moving forward, depending on Funtime Foxy's moving value, his progress will either not change or count up by 1 every frame. Instead of having a random range of 0 to 2 that determines movement every 2 seconds, Funtime Foxy has a random range of 0 to 1 that's rolled every 3 seconds. If this value is a 1, Funtime Foxy will add 1 progress every frame that you're moving and 2 if you're sprinting, and not subtract progress when you stop moving. Unlike Ballora Gallery, there's no guarantee that we can keep Funtime Foxy at 0 progress, as Funtime Foxy is still able to re-roll his moving value when W is held down, meaning if you were to play this section with the worst possible luck, you'd never be able to get far enough to complete it, making the main game of Sister Location completely impossible. In our case though, we're always rolling a 0 for this moving value, meaning that Funtime Foxy will quickly move away from us once we stop moving. And, even better, Funtime Foxy has no forced cutscenes like Ballora appearing in front of us. So we can hold down W the entire way through this section, and so long as we don't sprint enough to get past 600 progress, we can beat this entire section in 1 input. The remainder of night 3 is completely scripted, but the next night is where things get a bit interesting. Perhaps the most RNG influenced night in the main game is night 4. which more closely represents the structure of a normal FNAF night. In this night, we have to wind this spring lock suit up to keep it from snapping shut and crushing us, while also ensuring that the mini-arenas climbing into our suit don't make it in and jump scare us. Survive 3 minutes while the spring locks gradually unwind faster and faster and you win the night. There are 2 instances of randomness in this night. The first is how much the spring locks are wound up when the night begins, and the second is how much force it takes to remove the mini-arenas from your suit. Each spring lock starts out at 50 progress, being fully wound at the 12 o'clock position, then is randomly unwound 0 to 24 units at the start of the night. In our case, this means that all spring locks will start fully wound up. When a mini arena is climbing up into our suit, we can wiggle to get them off. Each time that you wiggle, the mini arenas are randomly unstuck by 1 or 2. Once their unstuck value reaches 4 or more, they'll fall down. So in our case, we only have to wiggle twice in order to unstick a mini arena. While this does make the night a lot easier, the general gameplay of Night 4 is almost the exact same as with any other RNG scheme. So while it is interesting to see how much slower you can play and still win, there's no real measurable statistic like inputs that we can track here. And that's pretty much all the luck that there is in the main game of Sister Location. Night 5 is completely scripted aside from the keypad sequence with Baby, which in our case shall repeat the same number 10 times in a row. Man, that would have been really nice last video.
7.
Where things do get a bit more interesting though is the Ennard boss fight and the custom night, the 2 more FNAF focused gameplay parts of Sister Location. These nights are known for being some of the fairest and best designed nights in the mainline FNAF series. Where other games rely super heavily on RNG for difficulty, Sister Location is praised for a fun balance between randomness and skill. Even with the worst possible luck, Sister Location's max mode was a unique challenge that I'd say was the most entertaining portion of that whole series for me. So if these nights aren't that luck based, what do we have to gain with the best possible luck? Starting off with the Ennard boss fight, Ennard will slowly have movement opportunities more and more frequently throughout the entire night. However, his chance to succeed on these movement opportunities is always a flat 50%, meaning in our case, Ennard will stay completely still the entire night, giving this boss fight an automatic golden trophy. Now, the question is, are we able to even lose to Ennard? Well, we have no way to lure him into our office, but we do have power in this night. I shut all of the doors and opened up the cameras to see what would happen when the power ran out. But powering out in Sister Location isn't like how it is in FNAF 1, where an entire scripted sequence starts the moment you run out of power. Instead, the night continues, but regardless of what hour it is, Ennard's movement intervals will accelerate to 50% every half second in order to punish the player and ensure they don't last too long while the power is out. But we are no ordinary player, and surprisingly, the Ennard Night earns Sister Location a full platinum trophy. As with the best possible luck, it is completely impossible to lose. However, that's only one sub-night of Sister Location. What about the true max mode of this game? Golden Freddy mode in the Sister Location custom night. Well, most of the characters in this night do have a high chance to appear and attack on 1020 mode. Funtime Freddy, Yendo, Bonnet, Bidybab, Lolbit, and Mini Arena 2 all have a flat chance to appear based on their AI values, either on some interval or when the cameras are dropped, meaning with our luck, these characters might as well not exist. This leaves Ballora, Electrobab, the Mini Arenas, and Funtime Foxy. Ballora will always succeed on her movements, but has choices she can make in her pathing towards our office represented by this directed graph. Similar to Ennard, she gets faster as the night goes on, but with our luck, she'll always trap herself in a cycle. With Electrobab, the Mini Arenas, and Funtime Foxy though, we aren't so lucky. Electrobab and the Mini Arenas are both camera characters, draining your resources of power and oxygen respectively if you don't shock them. However, they aren't directly lethal, as neither directly kill you. But Funtime Foxy is lethal, and we have no way to stop him with pure luck. Unlike Foxy in FNAF 1, Funtime Foxy doesn't use any kind of movement opportunities. Instead, he will progress a stage if you don't look in his camera from a random range of 7.75 seconds to 5.25 seconds. If he has just progressed or knocked on the door, this is instead shortened to a random range of 5.25 seconds to 2.75 seconds. If he reaches 5 progress and you don't have the right door shut, you'll die. Unfortunately, even though Ennard required very little user input to deal with, Funtime Foxy does, locking Sister Location's max mode out of both a platinum and gold trophy. Once again, we're dealing with an input puzzle. My first thought was to just deal with Funtime Foxy every time that he would appear by shutting the door, then instantly reopening it. But with Electrobab's passive power drain constantly being active the entire night, this wasn't going to work, resulting in a power out death at 4 AM. Shocking Electrobab is very expensive input-wise, as you have to pull up the cameras, shock, then pull down the cameras, totaling at 3 inputs. What's worse, unlike the mini arenas that drain your oxygen, Electrobab isn't always in the same camera throughout the entire night. He resides in cameras 3 and 4, but he shares this space with Funtime Freddy, and they can't coexist. So wherever Funtime Freddy currently is, Electrobab will always be in the opposite camera, and if Funtime Freddy moves, Electrobab will as well. Even though we're able to prevent Funtime Freddy from attacking us through sheer luck, we can't prevent him from moving, which will happen every 30 minus AI seconds. This means that even if we shock the current Electrobab, we'd have to click for another additional input in order to shock the next one. However, this ends up spending way more inputs than I think is necessary, and I was beginning to think of a strategy that might be able to completely remove all camera switches in order to shock Electrobab. You see, we have a huge advantage in dealing with Electrobab, in that his power drainage isn't cumulative. Once he shows up, you have 301 frames to shock him before he drains 1% of your power. This means that we could wait 300 frames before shocking Electrobab to stall him for as long as possible and face no penalty for it. Since this video isn't really a challenge and more of a puzzle and theoretical demonstration of what could happen, I decided to quickly mod in some counters for both Electrobab and Funtime Foxy, representing Electrobab's 301 frame counter and Funtime Foxy's stage and progress towards the next stage. From here, I began attempting to stall Electrobab for as long as possible. This usually resulted in Electrobab draining around 1% of power per appearance, as if he appeared when Funtime Freddy was on our selected camera, there really wasn't much we could do except wait. Through stalling Electrobab, I was able to get noticeably further into the night with this strategy, with absolutely no clicks required to switch cameras, but I was still around 10 seconds off, and getting a lucky power out was also going to be tricky. The normal power out check in Sister Location's custom night is Ballora, who, similar to Ennard, begins to accelerate by having movement opportunities every 0.5 seconds. However, she's still stuck in her cycle, so that isn't really an issue. The only thing that will take us out now is Funtime Foxy, and no matter what I tried, it seemed that Funtime Foxy was always lining up to attack right at the end of the night after we had powered out, resulting in multiple deaths around the 540 to 550 range. We needed some way to make Funtime Foxy approach sooner at 5 AM, ideally around 5:35, as Funtime Foxy would normally take 25 seconds to progress fully back to our door. The first way we could do this is pulling up the cameras to spend some extra inputs in order to offset Foxy and reset his progress. But there is still one other factor that we can control with our RNG powers. And what if the key was just getting a little bit of bad luck? In FNAF 1, whenever Foxy attacks your office, he starts back in Pirate's Cove with a random amount of progress. He can either be completely behind the curtain like how he is at the start of the night, or already peeking out and ready to attack. Funtime Foxy inherits this property in the exact same way, drawing a random stage of either 0 or 1 to start in when hitting the door. I had previously set this stage to always be 0, as that would be the most power efficient throughout the entire night. But if we truly had the best possible luck for our specific case of trying to beat 1020 with the lowest inputs possible, Funtime Foxy will choose to start in stage 1 when it's convenient for us. With this element of control in our hands, I took to the spreadsheets once again and began to map out when Funtime Foxy should start in stage 0 and when he should start in stage 1. And after a bit of trial and error, Electrobab stalling, and Funtime Foxy stalling, I had managed to line up a run that powered out just as the last Funtime Foxy hit the door at 5:36.
I think that makes it. Jeez. That took a lot of time, dude. And a lot of math. But that is indeed possible. You can just never switch cameras and be okay if you stall properly.
It's me.
Beating 1020 without any extra clicks or camera switches beyond the very first one in the night, bringing Sister Location's total input count for 1020 mode to 79 inputs, by far our most expensive mode yet. In my theoretical demonstration, I had first calculated 80 inputs, but then realized that I wasted an input at the very end by opening the door for Funtime Foxy when I didn't have to, so really the theoretical limit for lowest inputs is 79. Regardless, this is by far the most inputs we've had to use, and it seems that this is keeping the trend of games that are more luck-based requiring less inputs to complete. FNAF 2, 4, and Sister Location were all games that were possible with the worst possible luck, and yet they've all had very high required input counts to complete. Now, moving on to arguably the most luck-based game in the series, even more so than FNAF 3, how does FNAF 6 fare with the best possible luck? Like the main game of Sister Location, FNAF 6 is completely task-based, so we won't be ranking any kind of required inputs towards our input counter. Right away, I was pretty certain FNAF 6 was going to be our second platinum trophy. Animatronics in FNAF 6 always have a flat 1 in 3 chance to move, with this chance never changing throughout the game, only the frequency of their movements. All 4 of the animatronics start randomly in one of these squares on the map, and with succeeding any movement being completely dictated by RNG, they won't be moving at all the entire game. If they end up spawning in this middle square here, they could teleport to the room next to you. As for each character except Lefty, entering this square after a certain amount of time has passed in the night results in a one-time teleportation. I coded the random spawn chance to never spawn in that square, but even if we were somehow able to get them there, they'd have to succeed one more movement to enter the vent, which we know can't happen. We do have an audio lure like FNAF 3, but this again is chance-based, and the animatronics can just ignore it. However, unlike every other game in the series, FNAF 6 offers a different way for you to lose. If you reach 120 degrees in the office, you black out and lose. Unfortunately for us, not only are the animatronics completely governed by luck, so is the temperature system. In normal gameplay, you can turn certain tools on or off to increase the chance or frequency of temperature increasing or decreasing. Even with the worst luck, when the fan is on, the temperature cannot increase. So you might think that when the terminal is on, a computer that, heats up the room, and the silent ventilation and fan are off, that the temperature would be guaranteed to increase. But this isn't the case. The temperature is just very likely to increase, with a 50% chance to do so every half second. This means that in FNAF 6, there's functionally no way for us to lose here. No matter what we do, there's no way for us to get animatronics close enough to us to do anything, and even if we could, they'd never be able to hear us. We also have no way to raise the temperature in order to black out. As far as the main night sections are concerned, FNAF 6 earns us our second platinum trophy, but that isn't the only gameplay section where we have potential to lose. At the end of each night, we have the option to salvage animatronics for some extra cash. Boiling this minigame down, like many others, it's just a progress bar, where if the animatronic gets too angry at you for playing the quote-unquote audio response tapes, you'll get jump scared. You can tell when an animatronic is getting aggressive through both sound cues and visual cues, and you have a taser to reset this progress if you deem them too aggressive. The way that the game adds progress during a salvage is a simple 10-second check, where for every 10 seconds that the tape is playing, the animatronic has a 50% chance to add 150 plus 50 times the night number to their progress. Of course, with this being chance-based, we've already guaranteed ourselves a golden trophy, as we only need to execute required inputs to win here. However, there is an alternative way to increase progression, and this time it isn't chance-based. For every second that you look at your checklist, the animatronic will add 10 plus 10 times the night number to their progress. So, while it is possible to beat this night with just the required inputs, it's not impossible to lose, giving this subsection a gold trophy. It has been a long video so far, one that honestly I did not expect taking this much effort. Some of the planning that I've had to put into getting the lowest inputs on each night has rivaled the time it's taken me to beat some actual FNAF challenges. But now we only have one game left, and oh man, it might be the most complex one yet. Let's see if it's possible to lose an Ultimate Custom Night with the best possible luck. Ultimate Custom Night was far and away the hardest game to recode to have the best possible luck. In terms of raw size and lines of code, it's beaten by Sister Location, but with everything all being jammed into one frame of about 1,300 lines of code, things got pretty complicated pretty quick.
Yes, it is. It's there. I swear. Oh my god, he spelled he spelled ventilation wrong.
There is a lot that our RNG powers can do in UCN, and I think out of all of the games that we've covered so far, the solutions that I've had to come up with in this game are the most intricate. Unlike every other FNAF game, especially the earlier ones, Ultimate Custom Night was designed with the max difficulty in the custom night in mind. Other games usually require using some outside tool, getting insanely lucky, or abusing a mechanic in an unintended way in order to beat the max mode of that game. However, UCN's characters, even when set to 20 AI, still offer a chance to fail their movement opportunities. Usually, for characters that use the traditional movement opportunity system, they'll roll their chances out of 30, 40, or even 60 to still account for some randomness when set to their supposed max difficulty. I'll highlight everyone that uses the traditional movement opportunity system now. Due to how much of the cast uses this system, I won't be talking about them in this video, but if you are interested in the intricacies of every single character in this game, I have a breakdown of literally everything in this game on this channel that you could watch after this video. It's also worth noting that all of the secret characters will also never appear. Zor is a secret character that has a low chance to spawn in normal gameplay, but a 1 in 2 chance on every 10+1 second interval on 50/20 mode. One of the characters he spawns is arguably the hardest character to deal with in the game. However, Zor will continuously fail all of these 1 in 2 chances to spawn with our luck, so we don't have to worry. The characters that we care about are characters that don't follow this traditional movement opportunity system, and instead use their AI in different ways. These are always the characters that have made runs impossible in previous games, and tend to eat up our inputs. So let's see what we can do here. When we start testing for our platinum trophy and seeing if it's even possible to lose, the first character that probably comes to mind is the puppet. The puppet works almost the exact same as she does in FNAF 2, but just like FNAF 2, once she's at the point of leaving the box and waiting to jump scare, she only has a 1 in 3 chance to do so for every cumulative second that the cameras are up. However, the puppet doesn't just jump scare you when she leaves the box, she also causes the ventilation to rapidly run out, making you far more vulnerable to the rest of the cast. Resetting the ventilation is the only time that you are forced to go into the cameras in 50/20 strategies, and the overall idea is to try and wait as long as possible between resets to stall everyone out. If the ventilation does run out though, the game doesn't just jump scare you on the spot. You're not usually able to see this because your screen will turn completely black, but once the ventilation has fully run out, the game will force up the cameras, keep them up for 200 frames, flip them down, then try again after 1 second. For the rest of this section, I'll keep the opacity of the ventilation error at 0%, so you can still see the game even when the ventilation runs out. If not, the entire UCN portion of this video would just be a black screen, and that isn't very interesting. Most of the cast are only able to jump scare you when the cameras are up, so this is the game's way of making you more vulnerable. However, because of our freakish RNG powers, it doesn't affect us at all. So, if Puppet can't stop us, what will? Well, the character that's widely considered to be the hardest to deal with in the entire game gives us a bit of trouble. Funtime Foxy completely locks us out from our platinum trophy. At the start of the night, his showtime hours are randomized from 1 AM to 3 AM, but even if we got the latest showtime, our fate is always the exact same. We always start the night selected on camera 1, so without using any form of inputs, we're never able to go over to Funtime Foxy's camera and watch him on his showtimes, ruling UCN out of both the platinum and gold trophy. But come on, we all saw this coming. The real interesting part is seeing the minimum number of inputs required to beat 50/20 mode. We've already determined that we're going to need to deal with Funtime Foxy somehow. The way that he's normally dealt with in 50/20 strategies is to use the death coin, but that requires 10 Faz coins to get, normally obtained by repeatedly pulling up the cameras to spawn characters that award coins upon dealing with them. This would take up loads of inputs, so my first thought was to instead try and watch Funtime Foxy's showtimes. When the ventilation is completely out, you're not able to pull the cameras down manually, but you are able to switch between them, and since we're in the cameras most of the night, this could work. However, there's 3 more characters that are the entire reason why Funtime Foxy is so hard. the plushie animatronics. Plushie animatronics require you to buy their plushies in the prize corner within 15 seconds of them spawning in order to satisfy them and keep you safe, which would force us to go off of Funtime Cove and also somehow get a ton of Faz coins. Normal 50-20 strategies deal with the plushie characters through cam stalling, in which keeping a camera selected prevents an animatronic from jump scaring you or entering the office. Since all of the plushies are on cam 2 and Funtime Foxy is on cam 6, you can kinda see what the problem is here. No matter what, we're going to have to get rid of one of the two, and Funtime Foxy is cheaper. This still doesn't solve the problem of Faz coins, but with our luck, we can definitely make stacking coins very input efficient. Speedrunning is one of the most common ways that games have been perfected. But aside from sister location, FNAF games have been kind of absent from this entire genre. However, for our specific problem, I'd like to bring your attention to a very niche subcategory of UCN, the Fredbear % speedrun. Golden Freddy normally appears as his FNAF 2 office sprite in UCN, but if you set him to 1 AI, he's able to be death coined for an Easter egg jump scare. The speedrun of this jump scare involves copious amounts of luck, in which you have to get a ton of Faz coins through the cameras, buy the death coin, then roll the 1 in 40 to have Golden Freddy spawn to initiate the jump scare. This record is currently held by Cam at 3.2 seconds, where she only needed to click one additional camera to have enough Faz coins to buy the death coin. On each camera, there are 11 possible positions where Faz coins can spawn, but each individual Faz coin only has a 1 in 20 chance of appearing. This means that the chance of Cam's first camera having this many Faz coins was a whopping 0.011%. Interestingly, these exact chances were used in a dispute between Cam and a different player over the Fredbear % record, in which Cam proved that the other player's record was cheated due to having insanely low odds. However, with our powers, we can push this number even lower. Instead of 5 Faz coins, we can get all 11 to spawn. The probability of this occurring extends into the trillions, but it means that we only have to use one input to farm up all of our Faz coins. From here, we can buy the death coin Funtime Foxy, and select camera 2, stalling all the plushie animatronics. At this point, there isn't much else for us to do except wait, so I did, figuring that the maximum input count required would be 7. 1 to pull up the cameras, 4 to buy the death coin and death coin Funtime Foxy, and 1 to pull down the cameras. But this didn't last long, as I soon realized there was one more problem that I had yet to address. Phantom Freddy has no randomness whatsoever in his progression, and once he materializes in your office and jump scares you, anyone that was waiting in the vent opening will be forced into your office for a jump scare. The only way that I could get rid of Phantom Freddy would be to hold the flashlight down for as long as possible, but this would destroy my power and also count for an extra input. We really have no way to stop Phantom Freddy from jump scaring us, but if we can prevent the other vent animatronics from getting through when he jump scares, we might have a shot. And it turns out, if we use our RNG powers in just the right way, we can manipulate all of the vent animatronics into screwing each other over. When the night begins, all of the vent animatronics have different speeds and pathways. Molten Freddy and Ennard will always take the middle path and are generally the fastest animatronics. Mangle can take any path, and Withered Chica and Springtrap will always take the slowest path. All of the vent animatronics have a set movement speed that they'll be reset to when they turn a corner, which is 1 for Springtrap, Withered Chica, and Mangle, and 5 for Ennard and Molten Freddy. Combined with their path efficiency, this is designed such that Ennard, Molten Freddy, and sometimes Mangle depending on what path she chooses, will always show up in the vent first before Withered Chica and Springtrap. However, every 6 seconds, every vent animatronic will re-roll their speed using these equations, and this is where we can manipulate them. Assuming the best case RNG, every vent animatronic will be as slow as possible, except for Withered Chica. When Withered Chica reaches the vent opening, she doesn't enter the office immediately and jump scare. Instead, she gets stuck in the vent opening, having a 1 in 15 chance to jump scare the player on every 1 second interval when the cameras are up. More importantly, Withered Chica completely jams the vent for Springtrap, Ennard, and Molten Freddy, who are unable to get through even if Phantom Freddy is jump scaring us. The only animatronic that isn't blocked by Withered Chica is Mangle, but she's so slow and always takes the most inefficient path that she won't even be able to reach our vent opening by the end of the night, preventing us from having to use any excess inputs to close the top vent or get rid of Phantom Freddy. This ensures that the only inputs that we have to do will be death coining Funtime Foxy. So I started up one more run, and ended up powering out pretty early into the night. But considering that no one was able to jump scare me with the ventilation completely ran out, I figured that no one would be able to here as well. Unfortunately for us, Freddy Fazbear is someone that we can't avoid. Freddy was someone that I initially wrote off when I was first mapping out this route, as to my knowledge, his progress was largely luck-based. He uses this equation to determine his progression towards your office, and there is a lot of RNG at play here. However, the temperature of the office is also factored in. Temperature was never a concern for me, as the character that is normally a check for it has completely random progression. But once we power out, there's nothing to keep the temperature cool and Freddy from reaching our office. The fan is on by default when the night starts, so at that moment, it seemed like there was no way to get around this without spending any extra inputs. The cameras being forced up by the ventilation running out seemed to eat up too much power for us to have a short enough power out to get through the night. I started to map out a spreadsheet of possible fan times, as it was looking like 7 inputs wasn't gonna cut it. But then, just as the Fredbear % speedrun gave me an idea, I was hit again with something different. What if I told you that not only can we beat 50/20 mode in 7 inputs, we can do it in less? And the solution is all thanks to one character: Old Man Consequences. Old Man Consequences is a very forgettable character in Ultimate Custom Night. You just have to press C to play his minigame or he locks your cameras for a short duration of time. But for some players, Old Man Consequences is one of the most important characters in the game. There's an entire sub-community of UCN that's dedicated to pushing the AIs for the game as high as they can possibly go beyond 50/20. The first major jump in high AIs was from 50/40 to 50/50, as this was when Old Man Consequences would lock the cameras right as he appeared. In even higher AIs, if the player ran out of ventilation at the end of a run, I noticed that even though the cameras were supposed to be pulled up from the ventilation being 0, none of the characters that were ready to kill would do so. Why? Because behind the scenes, Old Man Consequences is able to force the cameras down even when you're completely out of ventilation, resulting in a 0-frame flip, where the cameras are never actually pulled up. For all of the other distraction characters, I had coded them to never show up by default, as some of them could make other characters potentially lethal. But in our case, Old Man Consequences always showing up is actually the best possible luck. Now, OMC keeps the cameras down for so much of the night that by the time we power out, Freddy doesn't have enough time to get to the door, and we can finish the night, meaning that 50/20 only requires 6 inputs. 1 input to open the cameras, 2 to click on camera 7 and buy the death coin, 2 to click on Funtime Foxy's camera and death coin him, and 1 to click on camera 2. Then we let OMC force the cameras down and complete the night. That's where I thought this video would end, until I was proofreading an earlier portion of this script. Earlier, when I was discussing alternate routes to deal with Funtime Foxy and the plushie animatronics, I mentioned that even though you can't pull the cameras down while the ventilation has run out, you can still interact with everything in the camera system. The ventilation running out is going to naturally force up the cameras anyway, so why should we waste an input pulling them up at the beginning of the night? So long as we can finish all that we need to and get to camera 2 by 105 when the first plushie animatronic will attack, we can shave off that initial camera flip input. And it turns out, if you're fast enough with your mouse movement, you can do all of the inputs that we need to while the cameras are being forced up and down, bringing the final 50/20 input count down to 5. Along with seeing what the minimum input count for 50/20 is, I also wanted to test what roster you can get a gold and platinum trophy with. In order to win by doing absolutely nothing, we're going to need to turn off everyone that required inputs before. So Funtime Foxy and all 3 of the plushie animatronics have to go off, giving 4620 a golden trophy. Taking this one step further and turning Freddy off, you might think that this would result in a platinum trophy. However, there is still a way to lose. There's one more character that isn't based on randomness at all. If we make a ton of noise by having the power generator on all night, Music Man will inevitably jump scare us, so he's gotta go. I thought this would be where we get our platinum trophy, but unfortunately it's not. If we place a vent snare on the right in the vent system, Withered Chica will never be able to make it to our vent opening to block it. And since she can only go through on the right, Molten Freddy would be able to jump scare us. By extension, Ennard and Springtrap are also able to jump scare us. Even though their speeds are much slower, Ennard's efficient pathing still allows him to get in around the 3-minute mark. And even though Springtrap takes a slower route, he'll end up reaching us right before the night ends. Night Marionette also has to go, for a very strange and somewhat buggy reason. You see, Night Marionette has a bunch of random positions that get rolled every second. Then, once he intersects with your cursor, he begins to materialize. One of these positions is completely off screen, and it's where I have him rolling to go to every single time. Strangely, this position is still technically in the frame of the game. It's just stored on the very left top pixel of the screen. So, if we move our mouse up to the very left corner, that means he's gone too. You can still die to Balloon Boy voluntarily even if he's sitting down, so he's gotta go as well. I thought that I might be able to lure any of the duct animatronics down to our duct opening in order to get them to jump scare us, but it turns out they all have to succeed at least one movement opportunity in order to appear in the duct system. That leaves this roster. With 39 characters at 20 AI, there is not a single way to make any of them jump scare you, given the best possible luck. And that concludes our last game in the mainline series. Overall, the predictions seem to hold true that games that were less luck-based were going to score lower in this video. I hope you guys enjoyed this one. If I missed anything that you think could be more optimized, make sure to let me know down in the comments. This was a lot more work to put together than I initially anticipated. Don't worry, challenge videos will be back soon. In fact, if you want to have more accurate guesses on what future challenge videos might be, go check out the second channel where I post raw completions way before they get turned into videos. I just needed to do something to entertain you guys to buy me some time for other videos that are very, very hard. The skill ceiling of FNAF is rapidly expanding, and it's getting kind of hard for me to keep up with college videos and top level play. I can't say for sure what the next video will be. Maybe it'll be FNAF, maybe it won't. Regardless, thank you for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, please hype the video, like, comment, subscribe, whatever you want to do. If you want to support the Save Gym movement, make sure to check out the first link in the description. Check out any of my other socials. Peace.
You have no fucking trash. No, cause I died to a frame perfect. You said to fucking mankind in fake hours. Like I don't even got words for this one. I don't even got words for this one. You died to Malachi at fake hours. At fake 2, I'm Malachi dead. And you have fucking reverse CPS. How do you do that? Oh my god! Damn!